All right, welcome in everybody to the Important Nonsense podcast. Steve Bonham, Neil Smith, Mike Manning, 32 teams in 32 days. We are still in the AFC South, so I've moved to the hard stuff. You can get your glasses at Important Nonsense, shop.importantnonsense.com. It's the Indianapolis Colts to kick us off today, guys. Neil, this used to be your team with Peyton Manning. You've since moved on.
Simpler time.
Glory days, right?
Simpler time.
I mean, who doesn't love a team with Peyton Manning?
Right.
Anyone who would have rooted for anyone else in the division, I think, probably.
The Patriots, probably.
The Patriots.
The Patriots at any point in time in the last 20 years, pretty much. But yes, we will get into the Colts. But of course, today we are recording July 30th. So if any of the information we're talking about seems out of date, that would be why, because we're coming to you from the past. Also, 12-team PPR, 2 wide receivers, 3 wide receivers, and a flex, however you want to look at it. But that's basically how we're doing all of our evaluations. So if anything seems a little bit off to you in terms of ADP or our specific projections or rankings, that would be why. But we will get into it, kicking it off at the top, as always, with quarterback. And it is a new quarterback, Matt Ryan. This is a fantastic. I always love to do this after the trades have all happened and all the chips have fallen into place as is. So you have the note on here, Mike. The Colts made one of the biggest steals of the offseason when they got rid of Wentz after a terrible season, when he basically cost them their run at the playoffs. When he was out, they were playing fine, and then he comes back and literally gives away their playoff spot by playing terribly against Jacksonville. Hilarious. But that aside, they were able to trade him for capital. And not only were they able to trade him, they traded Carson Wentz to Washington with their 2022 second round pick and their 2022 seventh round pick to get another 2022 second round pick from Washington, a third round pick, and a conditional third round pick in the future. So they swapped twos essentially, and then they traded for Matt Ryan from Indy for a third round pick. So basically, when it all was said and done, they traded picks 47, 82, 237, and Carson Wentz to get 42, 73, Matt Ryan, and a future conditional third. So they moved up slightly in the draft and got Matt Ryan for Carson Wentz and a 7th round pick. I mean,
like
Chris Ballard doing it again.
Well, I was going to say, this is the difference between having a good GM and having a bad GM.
Yeah.
And Chris Ballard, as we've seen, pretty good.
Good GM.
Probably top 10 in the league GM. And
Because
whoever's running it with Washington,
his worst move he's ever made is getting Carson Wentz. And then he immediately got out of it and made it into a great move.
And he undid it. Yeah. He's like, nope. Hold on. Let me fix this.
Yeah.
This can't be on my resume. I have to undo this. This has got to come off. Like,
I don't remember another situation where a player was traded for, had a worse season than the previous year, and then got that much return.
Yeah, got a good return on investment. That's really the only conversation here, though. I mean,
like we joked about during the draft coverage we had about teams calling the Cardinals probably more frequently now.
Yeah,
teams are going to call Washington too.
100%.
Oh yeah.
100%.
Oh yeah.
If they can be fleeced that easily,
suckers market. Yeah,
100%. That's really the only conversation, though. We've got Matt Ryan, historically good, but last year not, and that was partially due to his team being horrible and also having pretty much no weapons around him. But me personally, I'm out on Ryan. I've got him in that tier with Zach Wilson, Davis Mills, and Mac Jones in the back end of my quarterbacks, ranked QB 27, because there's virtually no upside. Like, he gives you a legitimate floor, but I'm not seeing a scenario where he jumps into my top 12 this season. Is there anyone that wants to go to bat for Matt Ryan as a guy to take late in your draft?
No. If he somehow wound up being my backup quarterback, I mean, fine. But I've got him at 22, so he's literally like one of the last ponies in the stable at that point, and I'm not excited about it. And to be honest with you, if you're down that low, you kind of just maybe go without a backup. You know what I mean? Like, is it even really worth it at that point? But I'm not super excited about it. Mike, you've got him rated a little higher. Is there anything you want to say?
I think it's like you had mentioned, it's just the decent floor that you can expect from a player of Matt Ryan's caliber.
Yeah.
With the weapons that he has around him in the offense he has, like he's going to be a sustainable backup fantasy quarterback. Like, would you be mad if your draft you left with Trey Lance and Matt Ryan as your two quarterbacks?
No, I'd be fine with it.
Right. And both would likely be around double digit. I think Trey Lance is a 10th or 9th.
We'll get there. He's slowly creeping up the boards, though.
Of course.
As we get closer to August, he's starting to. I've noticed it. He's got a little green arrow next to his name.
Let's make it a little bit harder. Would you be mad if it was Justin Fields and Matt Ryan?
Still no. Then you're talking about a 10th round pick and probably a 14th round pick.
Yeah, so that's a doable scenario for a quarterback situation, and I wouldn't be upset by that at all.
Right now.
13th? Okay, I was close.
Yeah.
But again, you're most leagues you're looking at 16 rounds in the draft, so
he's your last actual pick.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Before you go defense kicker.
Just about, yeah.
Yeah.
Basically.
Second to last pick, essentially.
So I mean he's the Kirk Cousins light version.
Running back. This is open and shut. The top end at least. I think we're going to spend a majority of the time here talking about just Nyheim Hines, because Jonathan Taylor, number one across the board for all of us and the ECR and ADP. He should be the first player going off of your board, no matter what your format is that you're drafting. PPR, half point, no point, any of it. He's the number one guy. So let's talk about let's talk about Nyheim Hines. So Nyheim Hines is the backup. You've got Philip Lindsay, who they signed to be, I guess,
he's going to be Jonathan Williams.
The tackles.
He'll be Jonathan Williams. He's the third guy on the depth chart. He's there
to
that's what he's going to do. He's going to do that job where he has virtually no value.
They also have Tyson Williams, who of course was very briefly the guy for Baltimore last season. That's why you may recognize the name. But yeah, I mean, it's really all about Nyheim Hines. How much of a role will he have? Can he have while Jonathan Taylor is healthy? And then if something were to happen to Taylor, is he valuable as a handcuff? So we'll go with Mike first. Mike, what do you think about Nyheim Hines this season?
I mean, there's a lot of camp buzz coming out, which, I mean, obviously it's just training camp buzz. But if you're looking at a player that's a good receiving back, like there's no doubt about that. Yeah. Nyheim Hines is a good receiver. He's electric. He's got big playability. Excuse me. If we're looking at a player that you're going to take a shot at later in the draft, I'm perfectly fine with it being Nyheim Hines. Because if they do, like we see the receivers, obviously receiver 2 and 3 are not scary, not, really set in stone. If they do look to use Nyheim Hines in the slot or something along those lines, then his value is going to be completely worth it. Yeah. As we said with Matt Ryan, like he's a better quarterback than Carson Wentz, and this offense should overall be improved. If you can have the receiving back or the third down back in an offense like this that has a solid schedule, I'm perfectly happy.
Neil?
We've all got him rated pretty much the same, and I didn't even put an ECR tag on here because we're all pretty much in line. He's functionally RB 40. I'd love an ADP if you can pull one, but I've
got it here. So ADP right now, Nyheim Hines is 42.
There you go. So at that price
line
point,
with us, he's 10th round. So
that's what I mean. So at that price point, I'm more than happy to roster this because we've talked about this, Steve, how many years in a row, and I always say the same thing. Nyheim Hines, if he could ever carve out more of a role, the player is more than capable of having a great fantasy season for you, and you don't have to invest too much. Yeah. The issue historically has been usage rate. He gets nicked up sometimes, and then weirdly he just disappears. It's so inconsistent that's why people are scared off by it. But if this is what we're being asked to invest, I'm fine with it, especially with, as Mike pointed out, kind of the question marks at wide receiver in certain spots. So I could see a scenario where, especially with, I don't want to buy too much into the camp buzz, but they clearly seem to be interested in getting him really involved in the passing game. So I still believe these guys are going to sign a veteran wideout at some point before we're kicking the ball to start the season. But this is fine if that's what we need to invest for Nyheim Hines. And also, it's worth pointing out, you do get some bonus points periodically with him because he has historically run punts. So every once in a while, he'll run one of those in for you. He does it from time to time. 2 years ago, he actually had that weird game where he ran 2 punts in. Not counting on that, but
to me, I think it's a solid floor, right? It's a solid floor with good upside. I've got him in the same tier, to put it in perspective, as Devin Singletary. Like I've got Singletary lower than everybody else, but that's kind of where I've got him.
They'll go about that very differently, but I can see the point total being about the same.
It's that through his career, first of all, he's played 4 full seasons. This is year 5 for Nyheim Hines. He's never missed a game. So he's consistently available for you. Also, every year he's had at least 2 rushing touchdowns. He's had at least 57 targets in the passing game and at least 40 receptions. So he doesn't put up eye-popping numbers, but if you put his yards per reception, 6.7, 7.3, 7.7, 7.8. It's gotten slightly more every single year he's been in the NFL, which is why they're talking about getting him more involved. And again, the passing offense that we're talking about here, the coaching staff coming over from coming to Indy from Philly, they were talking about him being the new Darren Sproles. Well, last year was year 1 of the offense. Now they're trying to incorporate it into year 2. And we'll see if they can get him more involved as like the third down back and get him more pass catching in that regard. But even in just PPR format specifically, Nyheim Hines has plenty of upside to be a weekly flex option for you, even if nothing happens to Jonathan Taylor.
You mentioned handcuff, and that's what I wanted to spend a moment on. I don't view Nyheim Hines as a handcuff to Jonathan Taylor. He is his own player that has his own job. And would he get more of a role if something happened to Jonathan Taylor? Obviously. But he's not a handcuff.
I think the way
Philip Lindsay is the handcuff.
Yeah. I think the way I would I'd more look at it is Tony Pollard light.
Sure.
Right? Where Tony Pollard has a set role with Dallas, whether Zeke is playing or not. But if Zeke isn't playing, all of a sudden he's got a massive workload. Whereas I don't think Philip Lindsay just automatically gets all the rushing work.
No, they'd split
if something happens to Jonathan Taylor.
A committee.
Yeah, I think it goes 50-50 rushing, and it's still 100% Nyheim Hines receiving. So I think if something were to happen to Taylor, Hines all of a sudden jumps really into the top 30 and has upside to go even higher. But for right now, I'm fine with him as I've got him right around 40. I think it's 42. Yeah, 42. So I'm good with Hines where he's at, and he's a value play for me later as like a 4th running back off the board for me.
Any interest in Philip Lindsay at all? As a handcuff as anything,
we've seen it too much as a not usable fantasy commodity.
I mean, I'm sure that if the case were to be that Jonathan Taylor does get injured, and for like especially a prolonged period of time, Lindsay is going to be one of those massive waiver wire guys.
Yes.
But I'm not. That's just it. He's a waiver wire guy. He's not. I don't think he would ever get drafted in almost any draft.
No. And even then, I think it's more of he'd get picked up off waivers, but he would more cut into Hines' work than he would actually have a role himself.
Well, as we know,
wouldn't personally pick him up.
Well, that's the thing. In a deep league, he will command something. The issue with Philip Lindsay, as we've noted a million times on this show, is he doesn't catch well, which is weird because of his body type, but it's true. He just doesn't catch well. He's really a between the tackles runner, and he can run outside. But that's just it. How valuable is that in PPR style fantasy football? It's not what you're looking for. You want these guys to be able to catch. And so really Nyheim Hines is the one that I'm more interested in for those reasons. And Philip Lindsay is just an afterthought.
Wide receiver. We'll start at the top. Michael Pittman, breakout year last year, unquestioned alpha on this offense, and he has to be because there's no one else. I mean, they had plenty of opportunity to draft somebody or sign somebody, and they didn't. They were more focused on running the ball, playing defense, and then having Matt Ryan to basically manage the game for them. That's what they're going to do this year. So Michael Pittman is the guy. I've got him at 17. Neil, you've got him all the way up at 12. Mike, you've got him at 16. We're all pretty bullish on Michael Pittman coming back this year. 13 right now in ADP. So I would currently be out. Mike, you would just barely be out. But Neil, that's your territory. So
yep.
Tell us your love for Michael Pittman.
Oh, the love for Michael Pittman. The love for Michael Pittman is Michael Pittman target monster, effectively. You mentioned it a moment ago. There's nothing else. And they were more than willing, they proved last year, to give him the true wide receiver one treatment. And Michael Pittman, in return, kind of proved that he's not afraid of dealing with that one coverage. It wasn't impacting him too bad. And that was with Carson Wentz throwing ducks all over the field and being terrible. And having a backup quarterback for part of that as well. He still managed to have a season that is, I'm basically projecting him to repeat the season he had last year, except slightly more, because I believe Matt Ryan will be able to get him the ball a little bit more effectively. And I think they will throw the ball just an teensy little bit more than what they were doing last year, because you've got a quarterback that you would trust just a little bit more to be able to do that. I'm not a believer in anybody else in the wide receiver room. It'll come through in the rest of the rankings. I have virtually no interest in anything else. Mm-hmm. And I will say this. If they do sign a veteran, like I'm thinking they still might, because you mentioned they had an ample opportunity to try and sign veterans. They did float a contract over to Julio Jones. Julio went the other way. They're actively in this market still. There was a news report earlier this week. They're still kicking the tires on T.Y. Hilton. But I know why they haven't done that yet, because they're floating contracts to the Julio Joneses and the Odell Beckhams of the world. Now, if something like that was to happen, it's going to require a re-ranking of the entire wide receiver room. This is based on the idea that Michael Pittman is the guy, and there's nobody else there to cut into his workload. But if this is the wide receiver room we're walking into, I have zero. Michael Pittman, no problem. No problem, back-end wide receiver one, last guy in the stable. He'll have the volume, and they'll feature him. And as long as he can stay healthy, I think you'll be looking at the end of the year talking about the ascension of Michael Pittman into that conversation.
Yeah, if you're looking at last season being his floor, basically,
that's what
I mean, it's over 80 catches, 1,000 yards, and 6 touchdowns.
Yeah,
that's not a bad floor at all. So, and that, like I said, that being there's upside there. If they throw it, there was plenty of games where Carson Wentz didn't even attempt 20 passes.
Right.
Sure.
I don't think that's going to happen.
Insane.
This year.
Yeah, I mean this is a passing league now. It's almost unheard of for a team to not attempt 20 passes in a game, other than Mac Jones in Buffalo whenever it was a crazy windstorm. But otherwise, you're going to attempt at least.
Sure, blame the windstorm.
I forgot about that. I forgot about that game.
Blizzard on 3 passes, but that's we'll get to that later. That'll be.
Yeah.
No, I agree. You and me are more in line with what we're talking about here. Like weeks 2 through 17 last year in PPR, Michael Pittman was wide receiver 15. So if you're talking about that as his floor, then definitely draft him at wide receiver 13 where he's currently going. It depends on where he falls on your board too. Like that's the territory when people start pounding wide receiver. So it's entirely possible that the difference between him and the next guy is fairly close. Like he's at 37 overall. So he's going just ahead of Deontay Johnson, which is criminal, but he's going just ahead of Deontay Johnson. And then you can go down to, what is this? DJ Moore, 43, is at 17. So 13 to 17, they're all clustered within 6 picks of each other. We're really closer than it would seem, as 12 to, what was that, 19, 17? Yeah.
17.
12 to 17. We're all closer than it would seem just by those numbers independently when you look at ADP. But Michael Pittman, plenty of upside. And the greater point to take away from all of it is, like you mentioned, last season, Michael Pittman was number 1 on the team in targets with 129. The next highest was Zach Pascal with 69, and then Nyheim Hines with 57. I have them projected this year. Michael Pittman leading the team with 123 targets, and the next highest is Nyheim Hines with 61.
Yeah.
I mean, that's just basically how this team is going to work. It's going to be Hines and Pittman until they sign somebody else. Because even with T.Y. Hilton back, does that scare you at all? No, it doesn't.
I mean, I might lower him literally one spot.
Like,
he'll
to
go
me,
from
all it
12
does
to 13.
is kill Ashton Dolan. That's it.
Sure.
That's really all it does for me. It doesn't do anything to Pittman. It kills.
I'd be more afraid of like an Odell Beckham.
Yeah.
If that's the one that's out there, that if they brought in Odell Beckham. But even then,
you're talking about halfway through the season.
Sure.
Recovering from the ACL.
Right.
So.
If they were to sign somebody like Will Fuller.
Okay, that would be another.
That would be something to have a conversation about.
Yeah.
But until that happens, I think we're all set with
I'm
Michael
not even
Pittman
convinced it's going to happen.
As a high-end wide receiver 2 with wide receiver 1 upside.
Would you be mad if Michael Pittman was your number 1 wide receiver on your
I clearly wouldn't be.
Yeah.
I'm fine with
I
it.
wouldn't love it, to be honest.
I mean, obviously, it would cause you to have gone like RB heavy, maybe throw in a top tight end.
That's kind of my point. You're either going to have Travis
He's going
Kelce
right
or
now
something,
with the first pick of the 4th round.
Yeah.
So if you're taking Michael Pittman as your wide receiver 1, you've already got 3 players, and maybe you've got 2 great running backs, and like you're talking about, a top end QB or a top end tight end.
And I want to say that I am perfectly fine with throwing a dart at Parris Campbell late in drafts. I mean, he's barely in the top 300 ADP. So he's been good when he's on the field, but as we've seen his entire career, he just hasn't been on the field.
Right.
So,
and you've got it here perfectly. Insert the now healthy Parris Campbell looks great in camp. You forgot part of that quote though, but it's also looks great. Good chemistry with his new quarterback.
Yes.
That's the other aspect of it that you have to throw in there as well, because you're getting those tweets as well. He's getting a real rapport with Matt Ryan right now. He always does until he's injured week 3 of preseason. That's always how it goes for Parris Campbell. So
I will point out, I don't think Parris Campbell is bad at football. I just need him to be able to actually play the games.
Stay on the field. Just stay on the field. That's all we want. We were talking about last year, Michael Pittman, Parris Campbell, and T.Y. Hilton. One of them would be the wide receiver on the team. It was just a dart throw as to who it would be. No clue whatsoever, because they all had the talent to do it. But is T.Y. too old? Does Michael Pittman actually have the talent? And can Parris Campbell stay on the field? T.Y. was too old. Parris couldn't stay on the field. Michael Pittman was the guy left over. So there it was. It worked out for him.
Yeah, and he proved that the stage isn't too big for him in year 2.
So, Parris Campbell's shown flashes. He's been great when he's played, but he just never plays. So I don't mind taking a dart throw on him late because, like you said, you can have him for your last pick before defense and kicker. Or if you're in one of those fantastic leagues where you can take him with your literal last pick and then drop somebody to pick up a kicker before week 1. Just anything like that. Fantastic. And the only other thing to talk about here, I got Ashton Dolan as the wide receiver 2. He's the wide receiver 2 on the depth chart. He's the wide receiver 2 I have in the projections. Even with that, though, there's not a lot of upside. He doesn't give you a ton in terms of yards per reception or touchdown upside. He's just a guy filling a void right now. Like I said, if T.Y. Hilton were to re-sign, he would immediately steal that role and those targets. And then kill Dolan. So there's nothing that I would want there. The only discussion is Alec Pierce, 2nd round rookie, not somebody that I was interested in going into the draft. Then he lands in a situation where they don't throw the ball and a not great older quarterback. Not something I'm interested in for dynasty either. Like there would have to be a ton that would change about this team over the next 2 years for him to be dynasty relevant in 2024 for me.
Michael Pittman would have to be gone. They'd be a lot.
Well, Michael Pittman could be there, but they'd have to have a legitimate quarterback and they'd have to change offensive styles.
Which would almost mean that they don't have Jonathan Taylor, which would also mean that Jonathan Taylor is either done or not on the team anymore.
Right.
Because he's so far and away superior to anyone else we've discussed that that's what would have to happen. It's never going to happen. It's not. If that's not the NFL's weird, but it's not that weird.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, Doolin's biggest claim to fame last year was drawing pass interferences, and Alec Pierce is a
now.
poor
See, if you follow the nerd and you
route runner.
want pass interference to count in fantasy football, then that is someone that you want to draft late. But if you don't, then no.
3 very angry people on the internet that want that to happen.
That are all with them. Yeah.
Are we gonna make a shirt for that? I don't think so.
Oh, I don't. Maybe we should. That's a good.
I mean, we could sell 3 shirts. Like, I'm not going to turn that down.
I mean, I'm sure that the nerd would buy like 4 himself.
Yeah, exactly.
You got to rotate them.
Yeah, get the colors
different
going.
colors. Yeah.
No one is it. No one. It seems like no one is interested in Alec Pierce. This is just good.
We
couldn't even muster a real discussion.
Is wide receiver 67. He's going in the 16th round. So people are just taking a flyer on him late, but I think it's a waste of a draft pick.
The conversation we were having is mostly around the people in Dynasty that were pounding the table for him. It's not even really a redraft conversation.
Right.
So it's a name to know.
Even in redraft, you won't hear this often, but I'd rather draft a kicker. You won't hear me say that very often, but in the 16th round of my draft, if my choices are Alec Pierce or the top available kicker on the board, I'd rather take the kicker.
Wow.
I feel like it's like I'm just going to cut Alec Pierce next week to pick up that kicker for week 1 anyway. So why bother?
Yeah.
He's not in discussion for anything unless something happens to Pittman injury-wise.
All right. Tight end, Mac. Some action.
It's the biggest tight end room in the NFL.
I mean, saying virtually nothing. Kylan Grayson was pushing Mac last season, and then they also got Jelani Woods and Andrew. I'm not even going to try it. What is it, Ogletree? I'm not going to bother because I don't care about rookie tight end anyway, but a 6th round rookie, definitely don't care. So there's just so much competition right now for Mo Alley-Cox. And I remember a big part of our discussion last year was, well, Carson Wentz, he loves to throw to the tight end. So does he really love to throw to the tight end, or was it just the system in Philadelphia because he had nobody else to throw to except Zach Ertz? It was Philadelphia.
It was Philadelphia.
Yeah. It was Philadelphia.
The wide receivers were bad.
Yeah. Like I said already, it was Michael Pittman, then Pascal, then Hines, then Taylor, then Mo Alley-Cox, and Jack Doyle at 45 and 43 in terms of targets. Like, they split it. There was no one guy who had that role. So, I mean, I guess combined the tight ends were more than any other wide receiver or running back, but
it's just this room screams tight end committee.
Yeah.
Which is a horrible thing for fantasy.
I mean, it's so difficult to evaluate and talk about tight end because it always comes down to, if you're not in the top 5, it's hope for a tight end touchdown and you win the week. That's it.
Mm-hmm.
That's literally it, because you're not going to get the volume or production for it to matter. So you're just guessing who's the streamer you want that week to score a touchdown. Because if they score a touchdown, you win. And if they don't score a touchdown, it's on the rest of your team to carry you. That's it.
They certainly have a type. Certainly have a type. They love their giant 6'5" plus, 6'7" huge guys that will lumber down the field. But none of this matters. I don't view any Colts tight end as rosterable. That's simple.
Yeah.
In fact, there's only like 4 players on the Colts that are rosterable, as we kind of went through here. It's Matt Ryan potentially as a backup. It's Jonathan Taylor and Nyheim Hines, and it's Michael Pittman. And if you want to take a dart throw on Parris Campbell at the last pick of your draft or something, knock yourself out. Go crazy. But beyond that, none of this matters. It's not rosterable. So rather than belabor the point, Steve, do you want to talk about defense? Because they do have a pretty good defense.
Defense and kicker, the Colts, I've got them at number 4 ADP. They have them at 5. But again, this is one of those things where, like I said, I have 2 defenses at the top. It's the Bucs and the Bills. Those are the 2 in a tier by themselves that I would take and not worry about it. And everything else is behind it. It's all situational, streaming, don't care. Colts have upside, but if you're going to have to pay up to get them, I'm not interested. But again, they should be fine. And then, of course, the man with the glasses, Rodrigo Blankenship. If you are into Rodrigo Blankenship and you want to go for him, by all means, you do you. I've got him at 12. ADP has him at 17. He plays in a dome. I mean, that's the biggest thing for me, is half of his games are played indoors, so ideal kicking conditions. And it's a team that isn't going to be high octane on offense. They're going to move the ball okay, but they're going to grind it out, play defense, and try to beat you that way. And they're going to stall a lot and kick a lot of field goals. So I've got them as a top 12 option, but I'm also okay if you want to pass.
If Rex Specs is your cup of tea, go nuts. Rex Specs always a crowd pleaser, but beyond that, like it's not really worth like going all the way into. For all the points you made, go for it if it's your cup of tea.
Yep. All right. Closing thoughts on the Colts at all?
I already made them. There's 4 players that you should be interested in, and
yeah, you've already said your piece, Mike. Anything?
No, I mean we've established that it's not exactly the sexiest of fantasy offenses, but you got Jonathan Taylor, the number 1 overall pick in every fantasy draft, and then the alpha wide receiver. Those are the 2 guys you got to worry about, and then you got some options later in the draft when it comes to Ryan, Hines, and Campbell.
All right. Well, as I mentioned, this is the right in the middle of the AFC South black hole. Tomorrow, it's Jacksonville. I wish it was next week. That would be great.
I
wish it was never.
Right. Tomorrow it's the Jags, so that'll be fun. Good thing I got this beer. I'll get my way through it. But that's it. Until tomorrow, everybody. Again, patreon.com/important nonsense, and keep up the nonsense.
I'm Tim Kitzrow from NBA Jam and NFL Blitz, and you can find all the guys at ImportantNonsense.com. Kaboom!